My story is eternal, and it's one that I have shared. It took me 40, 50 years to share it before I really opened up about it. It wasn't until I was in my 50s that I shared the story, which is interesting because children, uh, when you're young, nobody wants to hear it, nobody wants to believe it. So you have that, and as your kid, you just accepted, well, that's what happened, and I guess it happens to everybody, and I didn't think a big deal out of it. But I made a different opinion on that later on when a lot of things that I was shown happened, and I realized that I really was shown 50 years in advance. So I'll get there, but basically the crux of this first near-death experience I had, and I've had three of them, this probably has the biggest impact because I was young and it influenced me for the next 5 decades of my life. And my second near-death experience happened exactly to the day, 50 years after the first near-death experience. So it was interesting how that happened because my visions of the future ended in 50 years with me going to Babaji's cave. And then I had a heart attack and fell off a 30-foot cliff coming back from the cave. That's another story. I was born in San Francisco and come from a relatively very poor family. And I got sick when I was 8 years old. First, I got the mumps, and they weren't doing well at all. And I was still going to school, and I had the mumps. And then I got a lung infection, and then I got a kidney infection, and then I got a bunch of other things. I had about 6 or 8 things all happen to me, and nobody was taking me to the doctor. I found when a doctor was finally called, I was near death, and they took me to the San Jose County Hospital, and there I was taken away from my parents, my stepfather and my mother, and I was put on a gurney, strapped down, rolled out to an isolation ward because I had communicable diseases. And I only saw my parents after that about 5, 10 minutes on Sundays for the next year. So I was in the hospital 1 year of my young life. Figure an 8.5-year-old child, never been away from home, never had a babysitter. And all of a sudden you're all alone, coming from a family of 6, and all of a sudden you're all by yourself locked up in a room. So that's what I was facing. And my first night, they did some procedures to remove fluids from my lung because my lungs were filling up. And they stuck these big needles in my back, and they suctioned off all this material. It kind of had the consistency of like applesauce or something. It was fluids coming out of there, and because I could hardly breathe. And then they got through with me, and they just put me in this room all by myself. No nurse, no monitors, no nothing. And I'm hearing them talk to each other, basically saying they didn't think I had much of a chance, like it was too late. And they leave me in this room and close the door, turn off the lights. And I spend my first night away from home in total darkness, in pain, all alone, feeling unloved, feeling unwanted, feeling like, what's happening here? I've been abandoned, right? I mean, as a child being taken away like that abruptly and put into a hospital like that, it feels like you've just been punished. You just got taken away. And I was laying there in great pain. The lungs had a kidney disease. At the time, it wasn't curable. I had a kidney disease and a lung disease. And both those things were affecting me. I was getting pains in the chest. And then, of course, when you got kidney disease, you got pains in the lower back and other places and swelling up. And it was very uncomfortable. So the first night, I'm laying there in great pain. And all of a sudden, there is no pain. It's like, it's gone. And I notice that my body no longer feels attached to anything. It's like, when I say my body felt light, L-I-G-H-T, and the other kind of light, like lightweight and light like light, it felt both. It felt like it was light. And I was like floating. I had no weight. And I'm in the darkness, and then the darkness gets lighter and lighter and lighter. And pretty soon the room is lit up. And it's like I've been transported somehow or voyaged someplace outside of the body. And I realized when I say look down, in that state, you're not looking, moving your head. I mean, there's no eyes. But I said, I'm aware. I'm aware that my body laying below me is not me. It's this child all crumpled up, laying there, not breathing. And it's a part of me that goes, that's not me. This is me. This is at 8 years old, right? This is me, this consciousness, this thinking, loving process. This is me. This is the real me. The body is, it's not attached to me at all. And anyway, figuratively, materialistically, philosophically, it's totally separated from it. I felt okay with that. Didn't shake me up. And I felt no pain. And as the light got lighter and brighter and everything, it was like a giant embrace. Just an embrace. It's like the cosmic mother was just embracing you. It was love. It was just an embrace infused with the greatest amount of bliss, peace, love, joy. Picture having 1 million grandmothers all hugging you. That's what it felt like, 1 million grandmothers hugging you and pinching your cheeks and making you feel good and telling you they love you. It was the most loved that one could ever experience in 1 billion lifetimes. It's at that capacity. It's something that people that experience near death probably, and you've interviewed many, they've probably all mentioned the fact that you feel loved. It's almost understated how much love you feel, because there's no way to tell people, yeah, I felt really loved. No, that doesn't get it. It's not the right adjectives. It's total bliss. No worries, no fear, feeling great joy. And I'm laying there. Of course, I'm 8 years old, and you know that most people that have near-death experiences, adults, they get a review of their life. Like, what'd you do wrong? What'd you do right? You treated this person wrong. They look at all their life lessons. At 8 years old, what life lessons did I have at that stage? Right? It was like, so appropriately enough, there's like clouds. I'm in like these clouds. It's like, I don't know. It's like you see in the movies, heaven, walking around in the clouds. But I didn't picture it as heaven. But it was like clouds, and I'm feeling love, and I know there's presence around me. There's other entities, and then I'm shown a panorama, like television. Back then, I was thinking television movies. It's like a panorama of scenes unfolding in chronological order. And I'm looking at these things from the future, and then it dawns on me that I'm really looking at my own spiritual journey back on Earth. And so I realized that, and I'm realizing, well, I'm not getting out of here. I got to go back, because here's my journey being showed me. So that was kind of disappointment in a way. It's like, oh, I got to live all this. And a lot of the stuff I saw wasn't always good stuff. And but I saw my wife when she was a young high school, girl, and we met in high school, and I knew I was going to marry her. We're still married to this day. We met when we were 14, and now we're both 78 years old. So I guess that part came true. I saw the assassination of the President of the United States. I did not know who, at 8 years old in the 1950s, who John F. Kennedy was. He was just a senator or something. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know that much about politics, but I knew it was the leader of the United States. I knew it was the president. And he's in Texas, and I saw him getting shot. And when I went to high school, it was November, the week before the 22nd, it was November of 1963. And I'm telling the principal of my school and some of the teachers and friends, I'm going, hey, the president's going to get killed in Dallas, Texas. He's going to get shot. Yeah, Billy. Yeah, Bill. Yeah, come on. Nobody believed me until it happened the following week, and then it happened just like I said. Except in my version of events that transpired in the assassination, they differ from the official government version. In the official government version, they said Lee Harvey Oswald shot him. There was one shooter. That was it. In my version, there was another shooter, and but Facebook and all these other people tell me I'm wrong because I posted a video on the assassination once upon a time, and Facebook labeled it, lies, and the truth here is the truth from the government, and it's like, how dare I contradict what it was like conspiracy? And I go, well, I'm telling about a vision that happened, and here's what I saw, and everything in that vision happened. And if I said there was more than one shooter, I got to go, maybe there was more than one shooter, but maybe I'm wrong. So I saw that. I saw myself on a helicopter, Huey helicopters. I didn't know there were Huey helicopters. Huey helicopters weren't even around when I was having this vision, but there was they looked like tadpoles, like, these ones you see in movies, right? And I see myself sitting behind a machine gun, and I see myself in these war scenes, and I see guys getting killed, and I see guys getting wounded, and I'm seeing helicopters shot down, and I'm seeing explosions, and I'm seeing events that when I became 20, 21 years old, I actually lived through. And when I was in Vietnam, in the war, I would be telling people, hey, don't take that helicopter out. It's going to get shot down. These guys are going to get killed. And of course, nobody listened to me. And then when it happened, I was investigated by the Army, by the CIA, all kinds of internal people. I mean, there's a whole big file on me, as I found out from the CIA years later. I found there was a file on me. But it was, I knew everything was going to happen, which changes your thing when you go to war, because when when somebody's going to get killed and you try to save them by changing things and changing circumstances, I learned the lesson that, other people's destinies, they're not necessarily in your hands. It's their destiny. And just because something's going to happen to somebody doesn't mean you can stop it, because I tried. So I saw that aspect. And then I saw my children. I saw the homes I was going to live in. I saw the places I was going to work. I saw myself working as a scuba diving instructor. I saw myself going down in the water with all the gear. Saw myself doing all these things. But it only went 50 years. And I was thinking 50 years. I wasn't sure at the time how far, because I couldn't judge it was 50 years. But it turned out it was 50 years to the date, because the last vision was me finally getting to India at 58 years old, finally getting to India, finally going to where I wanted to go, which was Babaji's cave in India, to go to the sacred place. And then coming back from Babaji's cave, had a heart attack and died and fell off a cliff into a ravine. That's another story for another day. But it's interesting that these visions took me to that next experience. But I didn't know about the near death, and that all I saw myself was going to the cave. So the near death experience after the cave, an hour later, that started the next decades of my life. So I saw all these things. And basically, I eventually came back. And I say eventually because when you're having these kinds of experiences, there's no clock. There's no, oh, this is 20 minutes long, this is an hour long. When you're having the experience, it felt like 50 years. I'm living all these experiences, right? It felt like I was going through all these things. So it wasn't just seeing them, it was also pre-experiencing them. And so when I came back, even though I was gone an hour less or more, who knows? There was no clocks in my room. I have no idea. But when I did come back, it wasn't with great joy, because I didn't. It's like, boom, you're back in your body, and all of a sudden, now I went from weightlessness and love to pain. All this weight on the body, and it's not just your physical weight. There's the weight of the world, and I'm trying to explain that. When you come back, there's the material weight of the world. There's your life. It's there's a heaviness to that, which prevents you from being this and feeling this lightness that you have in you. So when I did come back and I laid there, I knew, number one, I wasn't going to die, even though there was intervention and things happened for the next year. I was in the hospital for 1 year, which is a long time. And when I was in the hospital, I was in a room most of the time by myself. Very few times I had somebody else in there, but most of the time by myself all day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. About a 10-minute visit on Sundays from mother and stepdad. And other than that, that was my life. No television, no radio, no record player, no books, no coloring books, no toys, no comic books, no conversations other than taking your blood pressure, how you feel. I mean, just adult talk on medical. Otherwise, there was no personal conversations. There was nothing. It was totally being alone. But I was living off that love I felt from the experience. And once you experience that, there ain't no going back. There's like, hey, I am loved, no matter what the world looks like out there. Even if the hospital ignores you and is cold, even if your family's not there for you, I knew there was a greater family for me. I knew that I was in the presence of the great ones. I wasn't alone. It's like, they're there. They're supporting you. It's like your spiritual family. Have an angelic presence. Some people might say. Some people say it's a great master. Some people might say it's your relative. To me, it was more of a angelic consciousness that I was surrounded with these people of high light, if that makes sense. High light meaning high intensity frequency. I mean, and I knew that I was being looked after. I knew at the time of that experience, kind of without asking, I knew I don't know how I know, but I knew from the experience I was coming back for a purpose. It wasn't coming back just to live a life and get married and there was something greater. And it was about service. It's about teaching people about love. That's all I knew. But I knew that there was a purpose and a reason. And so when I went back and had terrible experiences for years with pain and suffering, disease, I wasn't a healthy kid. And it was the knowing that all that suffering and all that pain was a gift. It was going to teach me what I needed to know for later on. And as I laid in bed for that year, instead of going, I don't have this, I don't have that, I'm bored, I embraced the opportunity to have that time alone, like a monk would embrace going to a dark cave, right? Like meditate. And so I was meditating, making up my own meditations. And I thought I was making up my own meditations. I did these things like breathing through my navel and I'm visualizing the energy and the light going up my spine and down. And I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm doing all kinds of things. And then 50 years later, my first trip to India, after my near-death experience there, I met a Tibetan monk who didn't speak English. I didn't speak Tibetan. And he brought me over and I spent 3 days with this guy. Never exchanged a word. And I learned more from that man than I had learned from anybody the whole lifetime. This guy. And he taught me this. He was showing me how to do this thing that I was making up. I said, wait a minute, that's mine. I made it up. No, apparently it was a Tibetan technique where you breathe through your navel. And anyway, so he showed me all these things that I'd already been doing that I thought I'd made up. And so while I'm laying in bed, I'm still, what's the word? If you cook coffee, you percolate coffee and it gets, in the old days, you had a coffee pot and it percolates, it gets better and better. It was like I'm percolating spiritual uh, wisdom, or at that age, I didn't know what to call it. It was just, I was learning things for that year. Even though the near-death experience was over, the learning continued that year. It was like those great souls, those great consciousness, that presence never abandoned me, never left me. Even though I was physically alone in the material world, I never felt disconnected from that source in the light. So when I went back, I was back, the body was back, but I wasn't alone. If that makes sense, it's hard to explain, but I was not alone. So therefore, because most people would kind of go bonkers if they had to spend all time with nothing to do all day long, like what? No, it was, I pictured myself like a monk in training, and the opportunity just every day, 24 hours, I could just focus on loving God. I made it my own. You'd call them mantras, but it wasn't in any language. It was just, I love you, God. I love you, Jesus. I love you, Yogananda. I love you. I just had this love thing going, and that was my mantra, just loving all these great saints. My mother and the family belonged to Self-Realization Fellowship, which is organization of Yogananda since 1940. They joined in 1946 when the book came out. So all my life, I've been exposed to information on Yogananda and Babaji and all that. And the one story that I really focused on in the whole book was a chapter called Babaji's Cave, where this great avatar, this saint, this godlike being reintroduces this ancient form of meditation called Kriya Yoga. And he brings it back into the world in the 1800s and meets this Larry Masha in the mountains in the Himalayas in India, and reinstructs him in this technique and reintroduces it. And it happened at this cave. And at 8 years old, I wanted to go to that cave. I wanted to go to India. I wanted to experience that sacred place. I wanted that energy there. And in my visions, when I was having the near-death experience, I went to Babaji's cave. That was like the end of the experiences. So I said, oh, I'm going to be, I didn't know about the having to die and fall off a mountain afterwards, but oh yeah, I'm going to be there, right? So I didn't realize it was going to take 50 years. 50 years. I had a lot of opportunity. I kept trying to go to India and everything happened, got in the way, marriage, kids, job, health, all kinds of stuff. And it wasn't until I was retired that I found, 58 years old, I got to go, right? And then I had a near-death experience there. But laying in bed, teaching myself, and again, I have to emphasize, as I say that, my mind is saying, you didn't teach yourself anything. You were listening to someone else, right? Teachers were teaching you. All these years until this moment, I just realized that I'm just, because my mind's saying, no, guy, you didn't teach yourself anything. This was downloaded to you laying in bed, and in your childlike mind, no, I'm learning these things. It was not something that anybody want to discuss. If you talk to people, nobody talked about these things. It just wasn't on television. There was no books out. I just figured it was a personal spiritual experience, and I was okay. I was okay just keeping a personal spiritual experience. It wasn't until in my 50s that I realized I'm not supposed to keep this secret. This is something that the knowledge of this and the story itself would be inspirational to others, and it would help others, and it would help people understand love, and it help people understand death and not death, and there is no death. And so it was at the later stages. I think I read Raymond Moody and a couple other people's things and went online, and I'm going, well, these guys aren't afraid to share stuff. I found more and more people were sharing stuff because it's not the type of thing that you didn't want to be judged. You didn't want to be out there being so different. And I was happy just saying, this is okay. Now, with my mother, though, the first week or so I got out of the hospital after a year. See, I've been practicing. When I was in the hospital, I was practicing what I call recharging. One of the things I learned from Self-Realization Fellowship at 8 years old, and I was 9 when I got out, was they had these exercises where you could visualize energy coming in through your, top of your head and infusing in you, and then you use dynamic tension, and you could charge your body up to meditate. But when I was in the hospital with incurable diseases, I thought, well, why not use this energy to cure me, right? So I was never going to get out of that hospital. I got out after a year. That was a big deal. But when I got out, I remember practicing these techniques. I go, well, if I'm charging my body, that charge is there in a battery, right? Well, what are you going to do with it? So I thought in my mind, that stuff it's transferable to others. And I had a chance to try that out. I was sitting on the couch. It was about a week after I got out of the hospital. Our dog was a poodle, ran out of the house, got right in front of the road and got hit by a car going 40 miles an hour, and it flattened, and it was there. And I ran out there, and the driver's crying, and I look at the dog, and he's kind of flat. His tongue's hanging out, nose coming out of the, blood coming out of both nostrils, blood coming out of the corners of the mouth. Blood coming out of the tear ducts, which is odd, blood coming out of the ears. And the dog's just, with the tongue out on the side. And I picked up the dog and I brought it in. All intents purposes, I'm sure a vet would have said, let's put it out of its misery, but it was really bad shape. But I'm 9 years old now, and I'm going, no, I'm going to use what I know. And what do I know? This energy and love. And I took this love for the dog, this great love for the dog, and infused it with this charge of energy that I had within me. And I put my hands on the dog, and boom, it was like static electricity coming from its fingertips, which shocked the dog, jumped up, yelled, screamed, ran around the house, never took him to the vet. So I thought, the power of love infused with the power of yoga. And that's part of the stuff I do today, which is healing and stuff. But it's love is the greatest healing energy in the universe. Love. And that's what that experience really taught me, and amplified that. And everything in my life, from when I was a teenager and I left home after high school graduation, I lived in Hawaiian Islands, and then met this kahuna priest, and he taught me about love and forgiveness and, and being grateful and all that stuff. At the time, I thought this is a really stupid way to heal. And then as I got older, I realized, no, that's what I've been doing all along. It's always been love healing. It's always been about forgiving. It's always been about loving. It's always about appreciating everything that happens to you in your life. Everything is a gift, not a lesson. That's everybody's hung up on. Everything is a lesson. That sounds like a punishment. I'm going to teach you a lesson. Go to your room. No. Everything is a gift. That's how I look at it. Even the cancers I've had, the heart attacks I've had, the diabetes I've had, everything I've had, stuff getting shot by a machine gun, blown up in Vietnam, everything's been a gift, not a lesson, a gift. So my job is to unwrap the gift. What is it there for? So like with my cancer and going through all that I've gone through with that, I've realized that when I learn how to overcome and heal these things, that I could teach others, and I could teach others to overcome pain. And that's what I've been doing around the world. I've been going to Europe and to Asia and everywhere, and India, and doing this. And I'm telling you right now, the world is so hungry for love. And just teaching people simple things like self-love is the beginning of all healing. And when I look back, I'm thinking, yeah, that's why I tell the story now, because it's all connected. The original infusion of love and the love that I got, and then teaching people how to use that love to heal themselves of spiritual, emotional, and physical wounds and illnesses. Of course, you realize eventually that all illness, all disease all injuries is all spiritual based. But that's another question. But self-love is the beginning of all healing and enlightenment. Because when you love yourself, then you realize yourself is the greater self, which is everyone else. And then you love them. You love your neighbors. You love your enemies. You love your friends. And when you love God, you love yourself and realize that there's no difference. There's no separation between you and God. It's all just one. And we're all one. There's no borders between Mexico and America. There's no, borders between Ukraine and Russia or Gaza and Israel. It's all one. Politics and religion have created all the problems. So when you tell people, just relax, just love your neighbors, just love yourself, and then realize that they are all a part of you. And the rest of it will all take care of itself. But love, from that experience as a childhood, love was the one thing I went away with, knowing that love is the power for peace, for healing, for the world. And love is not the absence of hate or anger. That neutral place is not love. Opposite of hate and all that truly is, love is a positive thing. It's love is an action verb. It's a doing, it's a giving, it's a being, it's active. Saying you love somebody and the guy's dying on the side of the road there, but you love him and bless him as you walk by and he's dying of starvation. That's not really very deep love, right? So when you see your brothers and your sisters out there, they need more than good thoughts and a prayer. Love with action heals.
This has been the A.J. Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe.